think warming up, and then felt it throughout individuals, so took a look at it. You know, if it's a right guard, you can play through that. When it's a quarterback, you kind of need that muscle to throw. So unfortunately, going to put him down for a little bit here. We'll treat it day to day and see how he responds, but want to be smart because he's a thrower, so you can't push that.
Rumors are swirling that Shedeur Sanders, drafted to be the Cleveland Browns franchise quarterback and already positioned as one of the NFL's marquee rookies, has undergone emergency surgery. Nothing has been confirmed by the team or the league, but his absence from practices has sparked questions about his readiness for the season, with Sanders fresh off a strong preseason debut and carrying the weight of both a franchise rebuild and league-wide marketing. Even the hint of a setback has become one of the most talked about stories of the summer. TV ratings spiked nearly 30% when Shedeur Sanders took the field for his preseason debut on August 8, 2025, a clear sign that both local and national audiences were eager to see what the rookie quarterback could deliver. That kind of momentum is rare for a player who has yet to throw a regular season pass, and it underscored why Cleveland structured its camp almost entirely around him. But just 5 days later, when Sanders strained his oblique during practice on August 13th, the Browns lost more than 40% of their scheduled first-team quarterback reps for the week. Those lost snaps may not sound like much, but for a rookie, they represent dozens of chances to build timing, work through protections, and gain comfort in live-action settings against pro-level defenses. The disruption to Cleveland's offensive installs is already obvious. Kevin Stefanski had committed to tailoring the playbook to Sanders' strengths, quick-release concepts that mesh with Amari Cooper's route precision, designed rollouts to buy extra time, and vertical shots that play to Sanders' ability to read safeties. When Sanders sits, backups run those reps, and the chemistry those plays require is never built with the actual starter. In practice reports from the days following the injury, Browns receivers noted the difference in timing, particularly on intermediate slants and seam throws. Without Sanders there to lead, the offense cannot rehearse the rhythm it needs to replicate on Sundays. That kind of delay forces Stefanski's staff into difficult choices. Either slow the installs to wait for Sanders' return, or move ahead and risk him falling behind. History shows why this is such a problem. Between 2010 and 2023, rookie quarterbacks who missed more than a week of training camp averaged a QBR nearly 15% lower across their first 6 starts than those who had uninterrupted preparation. Their completion rates fell by about 4 points, and interception percentages climbed by nearly 1 turnover every 3 games. Sanders had been trending in the opposite direction, posting a 61% completion rate with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions in his first NFL action. That performance gave the Browns and their fans confidence that he was ahead of schedule, but with the oblique strain sidelining him, the question now becomes whether those gains will hold or whether his early season stat line will look more like the historical averages for quarterbacks who miss critical time. The medical side of this specific injury also makes it a more complicated headline than, say, an ankle tweak or shoulder soreness. Oblique strains directly affect the rotational force quarterbacks generate when throwing. Without full strength through the core, velocity dips, accuracy wavers, and even routine passes put stress on other parts of the body as mechanics compensate. Analysts familiar with the injury note recovery windows of anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, depending on severity, and while the Browns have labeled Sanders day-to-day, even the most optimistic scenario still cuts deeply into his preseason workload. Stefanski acknowledged as much, calling the injury minor, but stressing the need to be cautious because of its direct role in throwing motion. That caution is what makes this more than just a blip. It's a pause in development at the worst possible moment. For Cleveland, the ripple effects extend beyond practice efficiency. Week 1 on September 7th looms against an AFC North rival, and every lost rep now compounds into real risk then. Sanders was expected to take the vast majority of first-team snaps to prepare for disguises and blitz looks from defenses like Baltimore's and Pittsburgh's. With those opportunities gone, he will step into September less tested, less in rhythm, and potentially still working his way back to full velocity. That is not the situation any team wants for a rookie who is supposed to carry the franchise in one of the NFL's toughest divisions. The business impact is already visible too. Ticket resale prices for Cleveland's upcoming preseason game against Philadelphia dropped from triple digits to just above face value once Sanders was ruled out. Secondary market trackers reported a dip of more than 25% in average resale price within 24 hours of the announcement. Sportsbooks also reacted. According to reports from multiple outlets, Browns-related prop bets tied to Sanders' passing yardage and touchdowns fell by nearly half in volume during the week of his absence. That kind of swing underscores how much attention, excitement, and financial action is already tethered to his presence. Nationally, networks that rode the surge in ratings during Sanders' debut now face a different challenge. Preseason games rarely draw strong numbers, but Sanders' opener brought in millions more viewers than the Browns' previous preseason matchup in 2024. Without him, those figures are likely to regress. Advertisers who bought inventory around those broadcasts did so on the expectation of seeing Sanders. His absence forces producers to pivot storylines, which in turn affects the NFL's larger narrative about ushering in the next generation of stars. Durability perception is the final layer of this immediate headline. Fair or not, once a quarterback's name is attached to surgery or injury speculation, that narrative lingers. Defenses test them harder, analysts highlight every throw that looks a tick off, and fans worry about every hit. Sanders is now in that position before his rookie season has even begun. Even if the injury heals quickly, the shadow of it will shape commentary on his performance. That perception alone carries weight because it influences not only how he is discussed, but how his coaches and opponents approach him in game planning. So the reality of this headline is not just that Sanders is missing time, it is that the momentum of his impressive debut has been interrupted, the Browns' carefully designed installs are fractured, and both financial and narrative storylines tied to him have already shifted. For a rookie quarterback, those are not minor details. They are the foundation of success, and that foundation has been shaken at precisely the moment when it was supposed to be solidifying. Unlike veterans who can fall back on years of NFL experience, Shedeur Sanders cannot afford to lose rhythm this early in his career. A rookie quarterback is essentially learning a new language in his first camp, and fluency only comes with repetition. Missing those practices after his oblique strain on August 13th, 2025 means Sanders is losing opportunities to master Stefanski's terminology, work through live progressions, and practice the cadence that keeps an offensive line in sync. By the time week 1 arrives on September 7th, those gaps could surface as hesitation at the line of scrimmage or mistimed throws, the kinds of small errors that swing divisional games in the AFC North. The player impact is already tangible. Oblique injuries compromise rotational torque, the engine behind velocity and accuracy for a passer. Trainers will be cautious about overloading Sanders because re-aggravation risks are high if he returns before full healing. That caution limits how much he can throw, how many deep shots he attempts in practice, and how confidently he drives the ball into tight windows. Quarterbacks who return from oblique strains too quickly often show temporary dips of 2 to 3 miles per hour in average ball velocity, which is enough to turn a completion into a breakup at the professional level. Sanders' ability to challenge NFL safeties downfield, a strength he showed with 2 preseason touchdown passes, now depends on whether his core stability fully returns before September. For the Browns, this matters because they built their 2025 offense with Sanders at the center. Amari Cooper's route tree relies on timing precision. Elijah Moore is most effective when the quarterback throws on rhythm to hit him in stride. Tight end David Njoku thrives when given seam balls with velocity before safeties can close. All of that depends on Sanders being not only available but sharp. Losing him for 2 weeks of camp alters those connections. Instead of stacking hundreds of live reps with Sanders, the receivers are adjusting to backups whose timing and arm strength differ. That fractures the continuity that was supposed to carry Cleveland into the opener. By the time Sanders returns, he will be behind his own offense's rhythm, trying to catch up in a system that was designed to accelerate his growth, not slow it. The league-level consequences are equally pressing. Sanders' preseason debut boosted ratings by nearly 30% compared to Cleveland's prior exhibition. That surge proved the NFL's marketing gamble was working. Fans tuned in for Sanders, but when he was sidelined, viewership for the following game dipped significantly, losing millions compared to the opener. That swing highlights how much value the NFL placed on Sanders as a new face of the league. In a year when Caleb Williams in Chicago and CJ Stroud in Houston were also drawing attention, Sanders was supposed to be part of a trio of young quarterbacks anchoring national broadcasts. Now, with his timeline uncertain, the NFL risks having its promotional balance disrupted. For Cleveland specifically, this comes at a fragile moment in franchise history. The Browns have cycled through more than 30 starting quarterbacks since 1999, with instability at the position defining 2 decades of frustration. Sanders was drafted to end that cycle cycle to be the first true franchise cornerstone since Bernie Kosar. When rumors of emergency surgery attached to him before his rookie year begins, fans inevitably wonder if the team's bad luck at quarterback is continuing. Season ticket holders bought into Sanders as a long-term solution. If he starts the year limited, that optimism can quickly turn into familiar frustration, eroding the momentum his arrival created. Even gambling markets have reflected the uncertainty. In the week after Sanders' injury, sportsbooks reported a drop of nearly 50% in Browns-related player prop bets, particularly wagers tied to Sanders' passing yards and touchdowns. Futures lines on Cleveland's playoff chances also slipped slightly, reflecting how bettors recalibrate when a rookie quarterback's health is in question. That financial data mirrors the football reality. Sanders matters enough that his absence, even in August, shifts projections across the board. Why it matters now, in August rather than later in the season, is because this is the stage where rookies either set themselves up for success or stumble into a difficult transition. Sanders was supposed to spend these weeks building a foundation, timing with receivers, protection calls with linemen, situational awareness against blitz packages. Every day he spends rehabbing rather than practicing is a day lost from that foundation. He may still start in week 1, but he will be starting with fewer reps, less chemistry, and more scrutiny. And in a division where margins are razor thin, that difference could decide whether Cleveland begins 2-1 or 0-3. This is not just another injury story, it is a disruption to the most important developmental window of Sanders' rookie year, a delay in the offensive growth Cleveland has been counting on, and a setback in the NFL's broader effort to market him as one of its next stars. That is why the injury matters now. Not weeks from now, not months from now, but in this exact moment when every snap is worth more than the box score can show. Andrew Luck's career offers the clearest warning of how fragile even the most promising quarterback trajectory can be when injuries creep in early. Drafted first overall in 2012, Luck threw for over 23,000 yards and 171 touchdowns in just 6 active seasons, but he was also hit more than 370 times during that span. By 2015, he missed 9 games with shoulder and rib injuries, and by 2017, he was sidelined for the entire season, despite coming back briefly in 2018 to post over 4,500 yards and win Comeback Player of the Year. He abruptly retired at 29, worn down by the physical toll. The lesson in Luck's case wasn't about talent. His talent was unquestioned, but about the cost of accumulating setbacks and how quickly the conversation around a franchise cornerstone can change. For Shedeur Sanders, who already has whispers of durability attached to him before his first regular season snap, the risk is that his story starts to resemble Luck's sooner than anyone expected. On the opposite end sits Joe Burrow, who suffered a torn ACL and MCL in week 11 of his rookie season in 2020. The Bengals' future appeared uncertain when their new franchise quarterback crumpled in Washington, but Burrow returned by September 2021 and threw for over 4,600 yards with 34 touchdowns, leading Cincinnati to its first Super Bowl appearance in over 3 decades. His resilience turned a devastating injury into the foundation of a narrative about toughness and leadership. The Bengals supported him with better offensive line investments, and Burrow's bounce back showed that early setbacks don't have to define a career. Sanders' ability to come out of this oblique issue will be measured in a similar way. Whether it becomes a footnote or a defining narrative depends on how carefully Cleveland handles his rehab and how quickly he can return to pre-injury form. Robert Griffin III represents the cautionary tale of rushing back too soon. As a rookie in 2012, RGYC threw for 3,200 yards, ran for 815, and was named Offensive Rookie of the Year, sparking one of the most electric debut seasons in league history. But a knee injury in December, aggravated in a playoff game just weeks later, changed everything. Washington pushed him back onto the field too soon, and the results were disastrous. Griffin's mobility was compromised. His mechanics never fully recovered, and within 3 years he was no longer a starter. Sanders' injury is not as severe, but the management of it matters just as much. If Cleveland forces him back too early to salvage September, the risk is not just short-term performance dips, but long-term consequences that alter his trajectory permanently. Tua Tagovailoa offers another perspective, one centered less on catastrophic injuries and more on perception. Drafted 5th overall in 2020, Tua entered the league with hip surgery concerns from from Alabama, even after stretches of elite accuracy, completing 68.8% of his passes in 2022. His career has been defined by durability questions. Concussions in back-to-back weeks and missed games in each of his first 3 seasons led to constant debate about whether he could be a long-term answer. That narrative persists despite his production when healthy. Sanders now faces a similar challenge. Even if his oblique heals fully, the fact that emergency surgery and his name have been tied together will linger in commentary, shaping how fans, analysts, and even opponents think about him. The statistics underline why these comparisons matter. According to league data, rookie quarterbacks who miss more than 10 practices before week 1 average a QBR nearly 15% lower across their first 6 starts compared to peers who stay healthy. Their interception rates rise by nearly 1 per 50 attempts, and their sack rates climb, largely due to slower processing under live pressure. Sam Darnold, for example, missed extended time as a rookie with mono and injuries, and his completion percentage never climbed above 61% in his first 3 years. By contrast, Justin Herbert, who stepped into the lineup unexpectedly in week 2 of 2020 but had a full camp, posted 4,336 passing yards and 31 touchdowns, winning Rookie of the Year. Sanders' missed time now risks putting him closer to the former path than the latter if the Browns cannot get him back into rhythm before September. What sets Sanders' case apart is the spotlight. Andrew Luck, Joe Burrow, RG-Zoo, and Tua all carried expectations, but Sanders brings a unique combination of NFL heritage and college fame. His father's legacy as a Hall of Famer and his profile at Colorado gave him a national following before he was even drafted. That means every development, including injuries, is magnified. When Luck missed practice, it was local news until his absences piled up. When Burrow tore his ACL, the Bengals became an underdog story. With Sanders, the first rumor of surgery became a national headline instantly because the NFL has already elevated him into the role of a generational quarterback. That amplification makes the comparisons even more relevant because whatever path Sanders follows, Luck's burnout, Burrow's resilience, RG-8's collapse, or Tua's perception battle, it will be watched and dissected more closely than almost any rookie in recent memory. The through line in all of these cases is management. Luck's career was shortened by organizational failure to protect him. Burrow's career rebounded because Cincinnati invested in protection and patience. Griffin's trajectory collapsed because he was rushed. Tua's reputation hangs on whether Miami can minimize the hits he takes. For Sanders, Cleveland's decisions in August 2025 could be the hinge point. If they treat the oblique injury as something to manage carefully, his rookie year can still deliver on the promise of his debut. If they rush him, he risks falling into the same category as those whose careers never reached their full potential. Ticket demand in Cleveland tells the story of just how much Shedeur Sanders means beyond the field. When the Browns announced him as the starter for preseason, season ticket sales jumped by more than 4,500 seats, the largest single-week bump the team had seen since the opening of their renovated stadium. Secondary market prices for the August 8th preseason game, normally hovering just above face value, surged to triple digits as fans wanted to be part of his debut. The moment Sanders was ruled out of practice on August 13th with his oblique strain, those resale prices fell back to earth, dropping by more than 25% within 24 hours. That swing shows that his availability is not just a football story, it's a revenue driver tied directly to Cleveland's bottom line. The league has felt the same surge and dip in viewership. Nielsen ratings data confirmed that Sanders' debut boosted local TV ratings by nearly 30% compared to the Browns' prior preseason game in 2024, with streaming numbers adding another bump among younger demographics. Nationally, the broadcast drew an audience of more than 3.5 million, millions higher than the average preseason slot. A week later, without Sanders under center, that figure dropped back below 2.5 million, erasing the momentum the league had hoped to carry into its August slate. In a league that prides itself on creating star-driven narratives, that single swing in numbers highlights why Sanders' injury carries weight far beyond a training room diagnosis. Merchandise trends reinforce the same point. Sanders' jersey has been one of the top-selling rookie items league-wide since April, with the NFL Shop reporting spikes of more than 40% in Browns merchandise sales compared to the year before. Local retailers in Cleveland said sales of Sanders-related gear outpaced any other rookie rookie the city had seen in 2 decades. When the injury rumor began circulating, online tracking platforms noted a brief plateau in jersey sales, a signal that fans were suddenly hesitant to commit. It's not a collapse. Support remains strong, but the slowdown reflects how even speculation affects consumer confidence when a player is marketed as the franchise savior. Sponsorship and advertising partners are also watching closely. Local brands tied promotions to Sanders' first home start, expecting sellout crowds and TV attention. National advertisers purchased prime slots and broadcasts that promised to showcase Sanders as part of the NFL's new generation of quarterbacks, alongside Caleb Williams in Chicago and CJ Stroud in Houston. If Sanders is limited, those campaigns lose some of their edge. Networks that enjoyed the ratings surge of his debut would be left recutting storylines to focus on other rookies, and advertisers tied specifically to Sanders would see diminished returns. For a league that generated more than $12 billion in national broadcast revenue in 2024, those kinds of disruptions, even in preseason, matter to the balance sheets. Fan sentiment in Cleveland reveals the psychological weight of the injury. The Browns have been through more than 30 starting quarterbacks since 1999, a revolving door that has built decades of skepticism. Sanders was supposed to be different, a quarterback with national pedigree, family legacy, and proven production at Colorado. His strong preseason debut gave fans a glimpse of what that future might look like, and optimism soared. The injury rumor, even described as minor, reopened old scars for a fan base accustomed to disappointment. Local sports radio callers expressed frustration that history might be repeating itself, while rivals online mocked Cleveland for celebrating too soon. That emotional volatility shows how fragile trust is in markets where losing and instability have been the norm. At the league level, the injury complicates a broader storyline. The NFL has carefully marketed Sanders as part of its next generation of quarterbacks, promoting him alongside Williams, Stroud, and Bryce Young. That strategy depends on each of those players being active and competitive early. When Sanders is sidelined, the balance is thrown off. Networks can still lean into Williams and Stroud, but the absence of Sanders from highlight packages reduces the variety of narratives the league wants to tell. In a sport where television and marketing shape perception as much as on-field results, one rookie's injury affects more than just his own team. It disrupts a storyline built for national consumption. Even the gambling industry has adjusted. Sportsbooks reported a nearly 50% drop in prop bet activity tied to Sanders the week of his injury, including passing yardage totals and touchdown wagers. Futures bets on the Browns' playoff chances also slipped marginally, reflecting how bettors recalibrate when uncertainty surrounds the most important position on the field. Those shifts won't devastate the industry, but they reflect how much interest Sanders was driving in markets that measure engagement in dollars as much as fan enthusiasm. All of this reinforces the deeper context. Sanders' health is not just about football, it's about tickets, jerseys, ratings, ad revenue, sponsorships, gambling handle, and the emotional connection of a fan base that has long searched for a savior at quarterback. That is why the word emergency surgery, even in rumor form, lands with such force. It unsettles not only a roster, but an entire ecosystem of business, media, and fan expectation built around one rookie quarterback. If Sanders' oblique strain heals on the fast end of the expected timeline, Cleveland could have him back in practice by the final week of August. That would give him a handful of live sessions to re-establish rhythm with the starters before the opener on September 7th, 2025 against Baltimore. In that scenario, the Browns might still limit his workload early, trimming the playbook to emphasize quick throws and designed rollouts to reduce torque on his core. The goal would be survival football, protect the quarterback, simplify reads, lean on the running game, and trust the defense to keep scores close. A conservative start like that isn't flashy, but it could buy Sanders time to get fully healthy while keeping Cleveland afloat in the standings. A more realistic projection is that Sanders misses the remainder of the preseason entirely and enters week 1 with limited game speed experience. That outcome comes with real consequences. Quarterbacks who missed their entire first preseason averaged nearly 15% lower QBR in their opening month compared to those who had full summers, and turnovers nearly doubled in that same window. Cleveland would have to adjust expectations, not just for Sanders, but for the offense around him. Kevin Stefanski might lean on heavy sets with Nick Chubb, use shorter route combinations to minimize time in the pocket, and accept that the passing game won't fully open until mid-season. That kind of adjustment could produce early growing pains on the scoreboard, but it would protect Sanders from being asked to do too much too soon with a compromised ramp-up. The downside risk is that the oblique strain lingers into September, or flares again once Sanders returns to throwing at volume. If that happens, Cleveland would be forced to lean on its backup quarterback, likely for multiple starts, at the worst possible time. Opening against Baltimore, followed by matchups with Pittsburgh and Cincinnati within the first month, the Browns could quickly fall behind in a division race where playoff odds drop by nearly 40% for teams that start 0-3. Those games are not just any early contests, they're head-to-head swings in one of the NFL's tightest divisions. A slow start without Sanders could put Cleveland in a hole too deep to climb out of, even if he returns fully healthy in October. The longer-term implications go beyond wins and losses. If Sanders' rookie season is defined by missed practices, limited snaps, or inconsistent play tied to an early injury, the perception of fragility will attach itself to his name. Tua Tagovailoa, despite completing nearly 69% of his passes in 2022, has spent his entire career framed by durability concerns. Robert Griffin III, once seen as a future star, lost his career to a reputation for being brittle after rushing back from injury. Sanders has the tools to succeed, but if this first setback lingers, the narrative will follow him into every broadcast, every defensive game plan, and eventually into contract negotiations years down the line. For the league, the pivot is already taking shape. Caleb Williams is locked in as the Bears' Week 1 starter. CJ Stroud is coming off a Rookie of the Year season, and Bryce Young is under pressure to prove he belongs in the same tier. If Sanders' preseason is defined by absence rather than highlight plays, the NFL will shift its marketing focus to those names, leaving Sanders to regain his share of the spotlight later. That doesn't erase his potential, but it delays the moment the league has been preparing to sell him as one of the faces of its next generation. In a business where timing is everything, that kind of delay can change how an entire rookie class is remembered. Even sportsbooks and bettors will be watching Sanders' recovery closely. Futures markets already shifted slightly after the injury, with playoff odds dipping and prop bets on Sanders' passing totals disappearing from some books. If he returns on time and performs, those lines will rebound. But if the injury sidelines him into September, betting markets will tilt toward Chicago, Houston, and even Denver, where fans and gamblers alike will be chasing the rookies who are on the field instead of the ones stuck on the sideline. Cleveland's front office now faces the same question Washington botched with RG's Ice and Cincinnati nailed with Burrow. Do you protect your rookie quarterback at the cost of early wins, or do you push him onto the field and gamble with both his health and your franchise's future? If they err on the side of patience, Sanders could still deliver the season fans expect by mid-year. If they gamble and lose, they risk turning a minor injury into the first chapter of a long-term durability narrative. Either way, the weeks ahead will define not just the Browns' 2025 campaign, but the direction of their franchise for years to come. Shedeur Sanders entered August as one of the NFL's most talked about rookies, a quarterback expected to change the Browns' fortunes and give the league another young star to market. Less than 2 weeks later, his name is now tied to rumors of emergency surgery, missed practices, and questions about whether he will be fully ready for the season. The difference between those two narratives shows how quickly momentum can flip in the NFL, especially for a rookie quarterback. Even if Sanders returns to health in time for Week 1, the perception of fragility will shadow him until he proves otherwise on the field. For Cleveland, the situation is as much about patience as it is about urgency. Rushing Sanders back might help them in September, but the long-term cost could be far greater if it leads to a recurring problem. Choosing patience, though, risks falling behind early in an unforgiving AFC North where Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati won't wait for anyone to catch up. The Browns coaching staff and front office now sit at a crossroads where every decision carries both short and long-term weight. The bigger picture is that Sanders' story is no longer just about one rookie quarterback. It is about how the NFL builds its narratives, how fans invest in hope, and how fragile those storylines become when health gets involved. The league wanted Sanders in the same conversation as Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud. Instead, it is left to wonder if his debut season will be remembered more for what he missed than for what he delivered. So the question for Cleveland fans is this: should the Browns sacrifice early wins to make sure Sanders is fully healthy for the long haul? And if Sanders isn't ready to take the spotlight in 2025, which young quarterback will the NFL turn to as the next face of its new generation?